Awesome.
Crazy. Just to give our listeners just a little introduction, can you explain your idea of boundaries and why they're important?
Sure. So I define boundaries as the limits that we set around what we will or will not do, tolerate, or accept. So boundaries are very personal. And so my boundaries are very personal to me. And this piece is really important because what I notice is that most people relate to boundaries as something that is depriving or restricting or constricting. And I really approach boundaries from the place of believing that they are expansive, that they are the way that we are carefully choosing and consciously curating the content of our own lives. And so from that point, it's really important that I know what's okay and not okay for me.
That is so amazing, because then you also talk such an interesting take on being selfish.
Yes. I am on the bandwagon to reclaim selfishness. I think it's gotten a really bad rap. Mm-hmm. And I think what happens is that when we disown selfish, when we push it away, what ends up happening, first of all, is we start drawing all sorts of selfish people toward us. We start recognizing that quality we've disowned in other people. And it shows up as a mirror to really invite us to reclaim that part of ourselves. And why that's important is that when we push away selfish, we tend to praise selfless. Mm-hmm. And in selfless, we disappear, we vanish. So it's not about the either or, it's about the both and. And really, I see selfish, self-love, and self-care as three sisters whose job it is to support us in honoring ourselves. So selfish is being able to give ourselves permission to consider our own needs at least as much as we're considering the needs of everybody else. To start there as a baseline.
Right, exactly.
I love that.
Yes, me too.
It's so liberating.
Mm-hmm.
And you say in your tagline, and will set you free.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many of us, especially women,
Mm-hmm.
are raised to, as you talk about, to keep the peace no matter what the cost.
Right.
Before you add meat on that bone, will you please share with us what made you become a boundary champion?
Yeah, so I, just like everyone else, grew up without knowing what boundaries were, or that boundaries were even something that I could have. And I spent 4.5 decades of my life being pretty boundaryless. Mm. And I actually believed that my boundarylessness is what made me so exceptional at my job, for example. Mm. And what made me be able to stay in my marriage as long as I did. And so this is what often happens when we are people pleasing or peacekeeping or avoiding conflict or not wanting to rock the boat. And as you said, most people think the goal of relating to anybody, intimate partnership or my mother, that the goal is harmony at all cost. And harmony at all cost comes at a very high cost. And so, I was essentially, sublimating all of my wants and needs and desires to fulfill everyone else's. And along the way, I disappeared. And so my real first boundary that I set was when I ended up leaving my marriage. And from there, I started to recognize really how it's counterintuitive. The more I honor my own boundaries, the more honest, the more intimate, the more connected I feel in my relationships.
Wow, that's beautiful.